If a cargo ship carrying 10,000 containers needs to move from Shanghai to New York, its best option is the Panama Canal. The shortcut slashes weeks off the journey, saving millions in fuel and labor costs. But there's a problem. Actually, several. Severe drought has drained the canal's water supply, cutting ship transits by nearly 40%. Massive new vessels can't even fit through its locks, and then there's politics. Donald Trump has threatened to take back control, calling Panama's tolls unfair. So what if instead that same ship could unload in Mexico, transfer its cargo onto a high-speed railway, and reload on the Atlantic side in just 7 hours? Or skip Panama entirely and cross Nicaragua through a brand new Mega-Canal, twice the size of the original. With $270 billion in trade at stake, countries across Latin America are racing to build a replacement. But which one will win? For over a century, the Panama Canal has been a lifeline for global trade. Every year, about $270 billion worth of cargo passes through this narrow 80-kilometer stretch, linking the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. It's one of the greatest engineering feats in history, saving ships weeks of travel time that would otherwise be spent navigating around the southern tip of South America. But now, this century-old marvel is teetering on the brink of a crisis. It all starts with water, or rather, the lack of it. The Panama Canal depends on Gatun Lake, an artificial body of water that supplies the millions of liters needed to operate the canal's massive lock system. Each time a ship passes through, fresh water is drained from the lake to lift or lower the vessel 26 meters above sea level across the mountainous terrain of Panama. The original locks were engineering masterpieces, but they were thirsty, using up vast amounts of water with every transit. To meet the demands of the 21st century, the canal underwent a massive expansion in 2016. The new locks were bigger, deeper, and, thanks to clever water-saving basins, more efficient. The upgrade doubled the canal's cargo capacity and allowed for larger ships, cutting costs and boosting profits. For a while, it seemed like the Panama Canal was unstoppable. Then came the drought. In early 2023, Panama was hit by one of the worst dry spells in its history. Rainfall in October was down 43% from the average, marking the driest October since the 1950s. Gatun Lake's water levels plummeted, and by January 2024, the lake was nearly 2 meters lower than it had ever been at that time of year. The Panama Canal Authority had no choice but to act. They slashed the number of daily ship transits from 38 to just 24 to conserve water. But the cutbacks created a nightmare at both ends of the canal. Cargo ships piled up, some waiting as long as 2 weeks to pass through. Others forked over huge sums to jump the queue. Shipping costs soared and delays rippled through the global supply chain. The drought also forced the canal to restrict the size of vessels allowed through. The larger, heavier ships, designed to carry more goods and lower costs, sat too deep in the water, risking grounding in the shallower channels. As if that weren't enough, political tensions are flaring. In a surprising twist, President Donald Trump, back in office, has threatened to seize control of the canal. In his inauguration speech, he mentioned Panama more than any other country, accusing the Panamanian government of overcharging American ships and claiming, without evidence, that the canal is under Chinese control. Panama's president, José Raúl Mulino, has pushed back hard, insisting that tolls are fair and treaties are being respected. But with billions of dollars at stake, the rhetoric is only heating up. Meanwhile, the Panama Canal Authority is scrambling for solutions. One idea is to build a land bridge, a railway and truck route that would move containers across Panama without using the canal. This would reduce the strain on Gatun Lake and allow the canal to handle ships too large for even its expanded locks. But at an estimated cost of $1.4 billion, the project faces skepticism from shipping companies already wary of rising costs. So, with water running low, political pressure mounting, and global trade hanging in the balance, the question isn't just about saving the Panama Canal anymore. It's about who's going to step up to replace it. Rival projects are already in motion, but who will win this high-stakes competition? First, hit that subscribe button and turn notifications on. Let's start just north of Panama, Mexico. If you zoom into the narrow strip of land known as the Isthmus of Tehuantepec between the states of Oaxaca and Veracruz, you'll find Mexico's $7.5 billion bet, the Interoceanic Corridor of the Isthmus of Tehuantepec. This ambitious project stretches 1,200 kilometers, linking the Pacific and Atlantic coasts with a network of railways, highways and ports. It's like a land-based Panama Canal, swapping water for steel tracks. Here's how it works. Cargo ships unload here at the Pacific port of Salina Cruz, where containers are transferred onto trains. These trains then zip across the isthmus to Coatzacoalcos on the Atlantic side, where the containers are reloaded onto ships bound for Europe or the east coast of the US. The whole trip? As quick as 7 hours. That's a game changer, right? But here's the catch. While the route is fast, trains can't carry as many containers as massive cargo ships. Plus, every time you move cargo from ship to train and back to ship, you add extra time and cost. And Mexico's ports, they're not quite ready for the flood of cargo expected. Upgrades are in progress, but it'll take time before the system can handle the traffic volumes the Panama Canal does daily. Even when it's fully operational, experts predict Mexico's corridor will snatch only about 5% of the canal's business. But with climate change wreaking havoc on Panama's water supply, even a 5% shift could be significant. Now let's head south to Colombia, where another rail project is heating up. Look to the dense, lush rainforests of the Chocó region near the Panama border, and you'll find plans for the Turbo-Cúpica Interoceanic Rail Corridor. This 240-kilometer railway would connect the Atlantic port of Turbo to Cúpica on the Pacific. It's a shorter route than Mexico's, and on paper it could handle up to 196 million tons of cargo annually. To put that in perspective, the Panama Canal processed just under 193 million tons during the 2023 drought. But Colombia's challenges go beyond just laying down tracks. Unlike Mexico, which revived an old railway, Colombia's corridor would cut through untouched rainforests, home to indigenous communities and delicate ecosystems. More than 130 kilometers of the railway would run on viaducts to minimize environmental damage, including a staggering 119-kilometer stretch, the longest in the plan. The project comes with a hefty price tag between $7 billion and $15 billion depending on final designs. And don't expect it anytime soon. The completion date is pegged for 2050. That's if it even gets off the ground, as the project is still in its feasibility stage. Now shift your gaze slightly north to Nicaragua, where things get even more ambitious and a whole lot messier. Nicaragua's first stab at a canal dates back to 2014 with the proposed Grand Canal, a colossal 278-kilometer waterway that would dwarf the Panama Canal in size. The route would start from the Atlantic, connecting through Lake Nicaragua, the region's largest freshwater lake, and then stretch to the Pacific. The project was backed by Chinese billionaire Wang Xing's company HKND with a $50 billion price tag. But here's where it unraveled. Wang lost 85% of his fortune in China's 2015 stock market crash, and the project ground to a halt. Add in fierce protests from displaced communities and environmental concerns, and by 2024, Nicaragua revoked HKND's concession. But that's not the end of the story. Fast forward to late 2024, and Nicaragua unveiled an even bigger plan, a $64.5 billion canal stretching 445 kilometers from Bluefields on the Atlantic to Puerto Corinto on the Pacific. This new route would bypass Lake Nicaragua entirely, instead crossing Lake Managua. The government presented the idea at a China-Latin America business summit, and while Chinese firm CAMC has agreed to build port facilities, there's no confirmation yet if investors will bite. Considering Nicaragua's fragile economy and political instability, the project faces an uphill battle. But in the high-stakes world of global shipping, anything is possible. Next, let's hop over to Honduras, where another rail-based contender is emerging. The Honduran Interoceanic Railway, also known as the Dry Canal, was first discussed in the 1850s but never got off the ground. Now, with Panama's struggles, it's back on the table. This $20 billion project spans 440 kilometers, connecting the port of Cortez on the Atlantic to a proposed megaport at Amapala on the Pacific. The route involves not just rail but also highways and advanced logistics hubs. In theory, it sounds efficient, but in practice the logistics are complicated. After unloading at Cortez, cargo would be transferred by rail to a dry port, then by truck, then again by rail for the final leg to Amapala. That's a lot of moving parts, and each transfer adds time and cost. The Honduran government is actively seeking international partners with interest from countries like the US, China, and Qatar. But financing remains a major hurdle, and the project's complex logistics could deter shippers looking for a simple, reliable route. And finally, let's circle back to Panama itself. While rivals are rising, the Panama Canal Authority isn't sitting idle. Their biggest hope lies in a long-discussed but recently approved project, the Indio River Dam. This $900 million to $1.6 billion project would create a new reservoir connected to Gatun Lake via an 8-kilometer tunnel, supplementing the canal's water supply during droughts. The dam could allow up to 15 more ship transits per day, easing the current bottleneck. But it's not without controversy. About 2,000 people would be displaced, and local farmers are pushing back. Still, for Panama, this project could be a lifeline, helping it retain its dominance in global trade. So, who's going to win this race? Mexico's rail corridor is the fastest out of the gate, but it's limited in capacity. Colombia's project could rival the canal's cargo volume, but it's decades away. Nicaragua's Grand Canal is bold but bogged down in financial and political turmoil. Honduras has potential but faces logistical nightmares. And Panama itself is fighting to stay afloat with a new dam that could make or break its future. The stakes? Over $270 billion in annual cargo, thousands of jobs, and the future of global shipping. The world is watching. Which route will become the new king of interoceanic trade? Drop a comment below. We'd love to hear what you think. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the race to replace the Panama Canal, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Ultimate Mega Builds, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos.